Hi guys, this is Mrs. Foy, and this is a screencast about the introduction to anatomy and physiology. So you're listening to this lecture within the first couple of days of your class. So anatomy and physiology is a fascinating topic, and anatomy is the study of the structure, and physiology is the study of how it works. So, anatomy is going to be memorizing a lot of names of things and looking at how the structure is created. And physiology is going to be the function or how it works. And they go together. So, a lot of times you can tell just by looking at the structure of something, it gives you hints as to how it functions. There are two different types of anatomy. There's gross anatomy, which means the anatomy of what you can see with your eyes. And then there is microscopic anatomy, like what we'll be doing with histology, the study of tissue. So we'll be doing both in this class. Why is this important? Well, to be able to understand the human body or any body in a structure of a plant or structure of an animal, it's very important to look at the structure and, as I said, get hints about how it's function. So the first thing we're going to look at is different body cavities. There are two major body cavities. There is the ventral cavity, that ventral means in the front, and dorsal. Dorsal means that it's in the back. The dorsal cavity has two main cavities in it. The cranial cavity, which houses the brain, and the vertebral cavity, which houses the spinal cord. The ventral cavity includes two big cavities, the thoracic cavity, which is the chest, and the abdominal pelvic cavity, which houses the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. The thoracic cavity has three major areas: the pleural cavity, which is where the lungs are, the pericardial cavity, which is where the heart is, and then this area right here is called the mediastinum. This superior mediastinum cavity is one that we don't use very often. We usually at this introductory course talk more about the pericardial cavity. So there are 12 body systems in the human body. Some simpler animals don't have all 12 of these, and some of these we're going to be talking about in my course, and some we will not have time for, but these are the 12 major systems of the body and their major functions. So the first one is the integumentary system. That is the system that has to do with skin. Skin is actually an organ system. An organ system is going to be several different organs working together. So this is going to be an external covering of the body, protecting deep tissues. This is where our vitamin D is synthesized with the help of the sun. And this is our location of cutaneous nerve receptors. So in our skin, we have receptors that tell us about touch, pain, hot, cold, and many other things, which we'll learn about. The skeletal system is our system of bones and joints. It protects and supports the body organs. It provides attachment for the muscles, which go on top. It is the site of blood cell formation in the bone marrow, and this is a place where we store minerals. Specifically, calcium and phosphorus are stored in our bones. Our muscular system allows us to move. That's what locomotion means. It helps us to maintain our posture, and it also produces heat because we burn a lot of fuel in our muscles to move, and the byproduct of that is we produce heat. Our nervous system is one of the communication systems that we have in our body. The nervous system is a fast-acting control system. So it responds to internal and external changes, and it activates our muscles and glands. The major organs are our brain and our spinal cord, but we also have nerves. The other communication system that's a slower communication system is called the endocrine system. This is our hormonal system, and this secretes hormones through major organs in the body, and it is going to produce slow change over time. Our cardiovascular system is the system that is going to transport materials through blood vessels. And what moves those materials is a heart that pumps. And so the things that we are interested in moving and transporting are oxygen, carbon dioxide, which are both gases, nutrients that we get from our foods, and waste products that we have to get rid of. The lymphatic system is kind of like a sewer system. It's like those sewer drainage big tubes underneath the cities that drain runoff and then return it to a sewage system that cleans the water. And that's basically what our lymphatic system does. We have parallel lymphatic vessels that parallel our blood vessels. We have lymphatic nodes, which we have a lot of immune system function in there. That's why when you get sick or you have an infection, sometimes those get swollen. And that's a good way to remove debris and things that we don't want in our body. The respiratory system helps to supply our blood with oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. So this is our ventilation system. So we have air that comes in, we have gas exchange here in our lungs, and then we have carbon dioxide that is removed. Our digestive system is basically one long tube from the oral cavity all the way out the anus. It's called a bunch of different things on the way out, but that's where we break down food, and it allows for nutrient absorption into the blood, and we eliminate indigestible material that comes out as fecal material. Our urinary system is actually, though, what eliminates waste in our body. The stuff that we defecate in our fecal material was never actually part of the body. It's just undigested food. But in our urinary system, which involves our kidneys, that eliminates waste that are in our blood, nitrogenous waste that comes from breaking down proteins. That helps to maintain our acid-base balance, and it also helps us to regulate water and electrolytes, which are ions that help us be able to communicate with ourselves. We have our reproductive system. This is what is used to reproduce our offspring, and it also is involved in the development of males and females. So we have 8 different functions that are necessary for life. These would be good to make some 3x5 cards of these to remember. So all life needs to maintain boundaries, movement. We have to be able to respond to stimuli and change. We have to be able to break down and digest materials. And then we have to be able to produce energy. So we burn fuel from the food that we have broken down, and we use that to produce molecules called ATP, which allows our cells to run. We must get rid of waste, which is our excretion system. We have to be able to reproduce, and we have to be able to grow, both in cell size and number, and also to repair materials, structures that have been damaged. We need nutrients to be able to survive. These are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, and minerals. And we also need oxygen, which we need to make our ATPs for our cells. We need to keep our water intake constant. 60 to 80% of our body weight is actually water. We have to maintain a stable body temperature, and our atmospheric pressure, the pressure of the air around us, must be appropriate. So one of the main important concepts that you need to understand in anatomy and physiology is this idea of homeostasis. Homeostasis means balance, and it doesn't mean that it's static or the same. Dynamic equilibrium means kind of like if you're on a seesaw with somebody and you want to perfectly balance. It's not like you can just stay perfectly still. There may be a little bit of give and take, but the whole idea is that you stay balanced. And there are lots of different structures in the body that help us maintain that. So normally in homeostasis, we have some kind of a set point that keeps us in a range that would be good for our body. So for example, with our temperature, we don't want to get too hot, we don't want to get too cold. We have a set point range for our bodies, for humans, about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is going to be our set point. So one of the things that happens is that we are constantly being challenged by outside stimuli in our body, and we need to keep a balance inside of our body. If we do not keep a homeostatic balance, then that is what results in disease or death. So one of the things that we use to control homeostasis, we use something called a feedback loop. And what happens is we have signals from our body that go to a center locating system, usually our brain, and then our brain makes decisions about how to respond to that stimulus by keeping us in homeostasis. So we have three basic parts of a feedback control loop. We have a sensor mechanism that is giving information to our central nervous system, usually either the spinal cord or the brain, and our brain and spinal cord integrates that information. It allows us to interpret what the signal is, because the signal is always an electrical signal. Where it comes in the brain helps us to interpret whether that means pain or whether that means temperature change or whatever it means. And then we have some kind of an effector mechanism. So a lot of times this is a muscle which makes us move. Sometimes it can be a gland that releases something. One of the important terms that you need to keep track of in anatomy and physiology is the difference between afferent and efferent. Afferent means to, and efferent means away from. They sound very similar, so you need to make sure that you understand the difference. This is always to, usually the brain or the spinal cord, and efferent means away. So again, here we have, using our more accurate vocabulary, we've got some kind of sensor mechanism. This can be usually a neural mechanism, like some kind of nerve. So if something touches my finger, or I put my finger over a candle or something, I have an electrical signal that goes, in this case, to my spinal cord, an afferent signal to my spinal cord. My spinal cord makes the decision that I need to move my finger away from that flame. That would be an efferent electrical signal that goes out to my finger, which tells me to move my finger away from the flame. At the same time, my spinal cord is also telling my brain, hey, I just moved your finger away from the flame. You can thank me later. There are two major types of feedback control. One of them is a negative feedback control. So the way that you can remember a negative feedback control is that the response is always opposite to the stimulus. So for example, if the stimulus was that you are cold, the response is to heat up your body. So for example, if I walk outside and it's very chilly, one of the things that might happen is I might start to shiver. And shiver uses my muscles, and that helps me warm up. And so my response is going to be opposite to the initial stimulus, and that helps me maintain a balance. Positive feedback control, you can't see this word here, positive feedback control is sometimes used in bodies, and basically it is a response that increases the direction of the stimulus. We don't often see it in temperature control, but for example, one of the things that happens that's a positive feedback control is what happens when you bring a microphone too close to an amplifier. So what happens is the microphone is going to pick up and augment the signal. The amplifier augments that signal, and so they end up amping up the sound, and it makes this squawk. That's a positive feedback loop. An example of a positive feedback loop in humans would be the process of labor. So what happens is when you have a contraction, then your uterus is contracting and puts pressure on the cervix, which increases the contractions. The idea is that you amp up the contractions, and of course the result is you expel the baby. So I hope that has been helpful for you, and I will see you in class.